Welcome to another program in our series, Freethinking Forum. I'm Bill Weir, producer and host, and I'm delighted to have with me today David Hewitt.
Delighted to be here.
David, you have a big job coordinating on behalf of Minneapolis and Hennepin County the Office to End Homelessness that reaches out to other participants.
That's right, yeah. I'm the director of the Office to End Homelessness, which is a joint initiative of the county and the city. It's been in existence a little over 10 years and was established to help coordinate all of our community's efforts around ending homelessness through government, but also the non-profit sector, the faith community, the philanthropic community. We try to bring everybody together and get them working on strategies that will be effective, efficient, move people out of homelessness as quickly as we can.
Good, and I understand they're now Augsburg College has honor students that are studying this.
That's right. I was there last night with my predecessor. In fact, we were talking to a very engaged group of students. Exactly, yeah. Kathy.
And what is the scale of homelessness right now in Hennepin County?
So, I mean, sadly, there are an awful lot of people who both experience homelessness and even more who experience housing instability in our community. Last night, we would have had around about 900 single adults in homeless shelters.
900
and
single.
And in excess of 400 more who are unsheltered, literally outside or on light rail or in another place not fit for human habitation. That's the single adults. We also right now have about 125 families in homeless shelters. We are one of the few communities in the US that has a shelter all policy for families, so we believe that every family needs to get into shelter, and we try our best to do that. But still, there are so many people who suffer from housing instability in our community.
And one of your focuses has been veterans.
Veteran homelessness has been a big push across the country. In Minnesota, we're pleased with the progress we've made. Since about September 2016, we've been housing veterans who are homeless at a faster rate than we're identifying them, so we're moving in the right direction. But we're not there yet. We want to do better. Right now we have about 112 veterans who are experiencing homelessness in Hennepin, and I'm actually meeting tomorrow with a number of the veteran servicing agencies to work on how can we accelerate our efforts, how can we do better for those people and get them into housing.
And there was a library video, I think you
brought
along.
And we've across our community found a number of ways to engage people experiencing homelessness, to connect them to services, and I think we were going to watch a short video about some services at the library.
You're more than an angel, you know. Without you, I had no hope.
You know what you did more than anything was that you sat there and looked me dead in the eye and you didn't judge me. It was arduous and unbelievably difficult.
I was living in cardboard boxes, abandoned huts, trying to hold on to 2 and 3 jobs, you know.
I came into the library because I didn't know where else to go.
I asked a security guard, I said, is there any type of homeless help that you could point me to?
Sometimes some of the questions the patrons were asking were beyond the scope and ability of our staff.
And from that led to a collaboration between Hennepin County, the Office to End Homelessness, and the Downtown Council to have an outreach social worker.
I think people are less reluctant to ask for services from a librarian and sometimes are more able to look for that help and accept that help.
The thing about the library is that it's a place that's quiet and safe. And even with traffic and people and homeless, there's a sense of community. And that sense of community is all that the homeless people really have.
A lot of people are using those Hennepin County hubs exactly as they're supposed to be used and can go in there apply for benefits. But for a lot of other people, going into a government building like that can be very intimidating. In particular, for the small group of people who are really struggling with a lot of different mental health concerns, they are very reluctant. Sometimes that can be several weeks working with someone, building that trust. The library is really unique because I think people are in a different kind of a space when they're here.
The program has been extremely successful. So we've had a couple social workers from our homeless access team who've been covering some of those.
It's kind of opening a new door. We're going to where the people who are homeless are, and we're creating a connection point at that place. So I think that's why I like it. It's a practical approach. It helps the library, it helps downtown, but most of all, it helps people who are homeless.
The business community really sees this as an investment in a better downtown for everybody, a safer, more secure downtown for everybody.
We've just seen a real change and a real sense that this is a community library with excellent resources and amazing places for people to spend time.
I am now getting ready to obtain my housing after so many years of being homeless. Excited is not even a good word. I'm ecstatic to know that I've overcome the battle.
Kate played a good big role in my recovery, an anchor, if you will, to be able to start from.
This work is just about helping people, you know. It's about trying to make sure that everybody has all the opportunities that we all have. And I feel really proud of the work that we're doing here.
So that was really impressive. Do you care to say anything else about what we saw?
I mean, I think what I would like to actually jump to is just we've talked a little bit about the scale of homelessness, how it's been changing in recent years. And I think something that's very relevant for those people who are working in the libraries, they certainly see this. People working in the shelters see this. There's been an increase in the number of seniors experiencing homelessness in our community. Have more than doubled in the last 5 years or so in terms of the numbers that we see in shelter.
Wow.
Which is extremely concerning to us, of course, because that's people with greater likelihood of vulnerabilities, of medical issues. If they've had a long-term experience of homelessness, they have medical issues over and above their age. So that's an extremely worrying trend for us. At the other end of the scale, we see more and more young parents in our family shelters. So families where the kind of head of household themselves is a teenager or in their early 20s. Family homelessness has been decreasing overall in Hennepin County, happily, since the worst years kind of after the recession.
But the younger
families
under 20
are the ones that we're seeing more and more in our shelters.
Wow.
And obviously their children are very young themselves, and so that's of grave concern to us, and we as a community need to think about how to respond to that.
What are the underlying causes of homelessness?
So, I mean, there's a lot of debate in this area. I mean, fundamentally, and it seems simplistic, but I just think about how much people earn, how much housing costs, and how to tie those two things together. The number of people in this community that earn 30% of the area median income or less is in excess of 50,000. The number of households available to rent that are affordable to that group is around 20,000. So we're about 32,500 units short for those people who are earning less than 30% of the area median income. Some of those people experience homelessness, but certainly not all. Many of them are cost burdened, where they're paying a lot of their income for rents, or they're doubled up and overcrowding in properties, or finding other solutions. But that's a lot of people experiencing housing instability. When we look at the folks who are in our shelters, are in our streets, there are a number of different reasons that they might have become homeless, and a number of things that exacerbate the homelessness. But one thing they pretty much all have in common is that they're in that very low income group where housing is very hard for them to access.
What about the connection to mental ill health and chemical dependency?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that people often think of when they think about people experiencing homelessness, and it's a real thing. There was a Wilder survey in 2015 is the most recent one.
The Wilder Foundation?
Right,
Yep.
exactly. They carry a survey every 3 years, which gives us really rich data around this issue. And I'm going off the top of my head, but I believe the last one showed in excess of 50% with some kind of mental ill health issue, and in excess of 20% with a chemical dependency issue. What I would like to say, though, is that that's not a it doesn't tell us what the causal relationship is. Does the mental ill health trigger the homelessness, or does the homelessness trigger the mental ill health? Or does one play on the other and lead those problems to become much greater? The other thing I would just very quickly like to say on this issue is that it's very hard to tackle these kind of things. It's very hard for people to address these issues while they're experiencing homelessness. We as a community believe in housing first, that you can't get well while you're living in a shelter on the streets. We need to get you into stable housing first, and that's when we can then wrap services around you to help you move forward.
So those are the biggest barriers?
I mean, those are some of the barriers. I mean, in terms of, if we think about who's at risk of homelessness, and we had a study of young people experiencing homelessness quite recently, systems involvement. We see people who graduate from other systems. So amongst youth homelessness, we saw that I believe it was about 28% had been in foster care, and 50% had had some kind of criminal justice interaction. So that's a lot of people who experience homelessness who have been in other systems before and find themselves there.
And foster care, is that ends at 18 or?
So in Hennepin County, we have extended foster care, so it is possible for people to continue within some supportive services up until 21.
Good.
I am going to say this isn't my area of expertise, and just put that on the table. But we see those youth who have been in those systems are more at risk. The other thing I would like to talk about when we talk about who is at risk is the disproportionate number of people of colour we see in the homelessness system. Hennepin County, the African American population is around about the 15% mark, but in the homeless system, it's around about 60%.
Wow.
Which is, so it's one of the first things that really leaps out. And I believe that speaks to the multiple inequities in other systems, including criminal justice, employment, and elsewhere, that pile up and affect those particular communities. So that's something we should be particularly aware of when we confront these issues.
Now, are there solutions that we have here in our community? Are they working?
So I love that question because one of the things that sometimes bothers me is we spend a lot of time talking about the scale of the problem, and it can seem overwhelming. Around about in total, 2,000 people will have been on our shelters or unsheltered last night. But we do have solutions. And for the people that are able to access them, the people that we're able to support, they work extremely well. We have brought family homelessness down almost a quarter in the last few years. We do have about 5,000 households in permanent supportive housing that have experienced homelessness in Hennepin County. The vast majority are stable in that housing. We do actually have things that work for people. And that's what I feel can really mobilize as a community. We do know how to do this. We just need to do more of it. The issue that we have is the level of demand that comes into our system. I talked about the numbers that were experiencing homelessness last night, but over the course of a year, we'll see 9,000 people come through the homelessness system. Huge numbers of people coming in, also being helped to move on, and in some cases moving on off their own backs. It's this huge demand placed on a system that's working really hard round the clock, does have solutions, but with not enough affordable housing, it's a real struggle.
Now, you engaged in something called a 100-day challenge.
We did, and
do you have some video on that?
Yeah, I would love to watch a video about that. That was a great experience.
Good, let's watch it.
I was homeless maybe about 2 years on and off. We didn't know where I was going to sleep that day. I was back and forth, couch hopping. It was hard.
Sasha aged out of extended foster care in May and received that voucher. And so she had a certain amount of time in order to find the next apartment. And during that time is when she became homeless because she couldn't find an apartment.
The moment I was finna give up, I got good news that I got accepted, I could move in a second, and I was instant relief.
This voucher is really supportive, and in a sense that it provides security, I think, to the landlords, knowing that the rent piece is going to be taken care of. Now these youth can focus on building their income so that at some point they can be independent.
I can't even describe it. It was like a breath of fresh air walking and opening my door with my own keys that I got myself into. It felt love. I would love to always have my own place and not have to worry about being in someone else's house and in their space. So That's the very first biggest step to having a better future, is having your own stable housing with 2 kids.
Her stress is so decreased because she has that consistent roof over her head. It is her own safe space for her and her kids.
I grew a lot. From being the young little girl I was, didn't care what nobody was saying, to now being a mother of 2. I'm very proud of myself. Get my GED with a 1-year-old daughter and pregnant, 8 months pregnant with my son, all by myself.
Wow. You set what you saw as an unrealistic goal.
We did. So the 100-day challenge, we were one of 6 communities across the whole country to participate. And I thought our goal was going to be to get 100 youth into housing. And then the team, who were made up of youth who themselves had experienced homelessness, people who worked for the youth non-profits, people who worked for employment services, because a really important thing for us was to bring together homelessness and employment services for those young people. They set themselves a goal to get 150 young people into housing in 100 days.
50% more.
50% more, which I was very worried about, frankly. Part of the idea is you set yourself that really ambitious goal, but I felt that was pretty ambitious. I was delighted.
What did you attain?
What did we attain? At the end of the challenge, we had 236 young people who had been connected to safe and stable housing. About a third of them connected back through family reunification into family homes, which when it comes to young people we prioritize because a caring, supportive adult is a key part of helping them reconnect. About a third moved into homeless program housing where we provide a lot of subsidy and support. But then there were a third that were in these other settings where there were roommates and other creative solutions that the team came up with. And at the same time, more than 50% of them were connected to jobs, to internships, and back to education to set them on a path to sufficiency.
Now, I've heard about a federal goal to end chronic homelessness. Can you tell us what progress you made and why this group is a priority?
Absolutely. So when we talk about chronic homelessness, we're talking about people who have been homeless for at least a year, consistently or cumulatively, and in many cases far, far longer. In addition, they have some form of disability as well. So we're talking about very long-term homeless people who are very vulnerable, who use a lot of services in our community as well. A study a few years ago showed that those experiencing chronic homelessness, 80% of them had used ER services, and on average
the emergency room?
Right, and on
that
average...
That gets expensive.
That gets expensive, and on average they'd used it 18 times during the period of the survey. So on every kind of, whatever it is you're looking at, whether it's just that these are very vulnerable people who need our help, or we really want to save money and spend our money better for this group, it makes sense to connect them to housing.
Yes.
So what we've been doing for the last, we kicked off our efforts really last summer. We had pulled together a number of strategies to work with this group. A big part of it was our 5 single adult shelters in Hennepin all came together to have a shared data system a little over a year ago. And that's helped us really identify who's in our system, where they're moving. Last summer, we were able to develop a by name list of around about 250 people who were in our shelters, on our streets, who we believed were chronically homeless. Once we knew who they were able to start targeting case management towards them. We were able to make sure that they were getting assessed for housing, that they were getting referrals to housing, and we were connecting them to the services that already existed. This wasn't a lot of new resource, it wasn't a new program, it was really about targeting our efforts at this vulnerable group. Since last summer, and remembering this is people who have been homeless a very long time in some cases, we have helped more than 80 of them into housing, and we have more than 40 who are on their way to housing right now. So that's something that will continue through this year. I'm really proud of what we've achieved thus far. We do know with these kind of efforts, as with the veterans' efforts, as you get further down that list and the smaller the number gets, often the people that remain are some of the most challenging behaviors, some of the most difficult to house. So we're going to have to keep getting more creative. We're going to have to keep thinking about how we do this. But I'm delighted at the efforts our community is making around this group.
I've mobilized a group to work on Habitat for Humanity, building the homes or rehabilitating homes with the future buyer. But that doesn't move very fast. to serve these people.
And nothing moves as fast as we would like it to in these areas.
Yeah.
But it is that kind of, we need to keep pushing, we need to keep doing things, and we need to keep challenging ourselves to do better for these people as well.
Well, their targets, I understand, have been set to end homelessness for youth and families
Yes,
by 2020.
by 2020, so also ambitious. And these are federal targets that have also been adopted at the state and local level. I should just very quickly say that when we talk about ending homelessness, which it's in my job title, as you know, we believe and we see that homelessness can be ended for everyone that's experiencing it, and every day people are moving out of homelessness. But when we talk about ending homelessness as a community, it's not to say no one will ever become homeless again, because clearly the forces that drive people into homelessness are beyond the power of our response system.
Yeah. I've heard that there are 3 criteria.
That's right. That it be rare, brief, and non-recurring.
Good.
And so those are our goals. It's to drive for that rare, brief, non-recurring, and to get the numbers down and to make sure everyone that does experience homelessness experience it for as short a time as possible, and we get them out as quickly as possible. And we are focusing our efforts on youth and family. We've already spoken a little about the 100-day challenge on youth. With our families experiencing homelessness, we've made a lot of progress getting those numbers down in recent years. We've put a lot of supports in, and this year we have a new series of programs with support of the Polad Family Foundation to help us prevent homelessness. We're looking to get further upstream. A lot of the work that we do is driven by crisis and people being in crisis, and we need to be there. That chronic group is the classic example. But we are looking at where we can intervene in the eviction process. When somebody has had an eviction notice but they're still in their home, when somebody is looking at needing shelter, are there ways we can intervene there, provide some support, some funds to help them never appear in our shelter system? And I believe that's how we're going to get to that rare, brief, non-recurring.
Yes, that preventive steps are often the most inexpensive ways that we can take care of the situation.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at those, once somebody's long-term homeless and they've used ER, they've used detox, they've used jail, they've used shelters, it's incredibly expensive. If we can stabilize someone in their housing, we know that the risks of them appearing in these other systems drop dramatically. So it's an incredibly cost-effective thing to do, as well as, in my opinion, just being the right thing to do to try and stabilize people in their housing.
Now, what challenges and opportunities do you foresee in the coming years?
Sure.
Will it get worse?
So, I mean, I think, and I spoke a little earlier about the lack of housing that's affordable to people on very low incomes. And I think that's an acute challenge in our community right now, and it has been tightening in the last couple of years. We have a historically low vacancy rate. It's been hovering around the 2% mark, so very few properties becoming available, and historically high rents. And that's a perfect storm in which people who have low incomes or other barriers, criminal records, forms of disability, are the most likely to be squeezed out of the housing system.
Well, many people, I think, are asking, how can we help?
Right. And I'm delighted that people are asking that question, because I think it's important that we don't give in to fatalism. Homelessness is, I believe, and I've worked in different countries and they all experience it at different levels, but ultimately unnecessary. And we do have solutions that work as a community. And if we can support, whether it's giving your time, whether it's supporting your local nonprofits, whether it's engaging with your faith community, I think there are ways in which all of us can say, how do I help, and can address this as a community.
There are also people that own rental properties. If they would simply participate in the affordable housing programs that are out there. Absolutely.
I think when we were doing the 100-day challenge, we put out a call to landlords, employers. We want to work with you. We want to support you. You're a key. We know that you're business people, but you're a key part of the solution for this in our community. One of my, just while we're talking about kind of some of the barriers to housing, criminal records are one of my personal, it's one of my personal areas of focus. About 2/3 of men experiencing homelessness have some kind of criminal background, and often that prevents them from getting into housing. It traps them in homelessness.
I've worked with former inmates, so I've heard a lot about that.
And we need to find ways to help people move on with their lives and become active contributing members of our community once again, as they wish to be, and that means breaking down the barriers to them getting back into housing, back into jobs.
Now, David, you've worked in many other countries, maybe not many, but
A couple.
several, on the problem of homelessness. Would you tell us about this work and how it relates to your work here in Hennepin County?
Yeah, sure. So I worked, I'm not from Minnesota, as you can probably tell.
Oh, yes.
I worked for a homelessness non-profit in the UK, in my hometown of London, for 10 years. And then I worked in Cambodia, similar area, for 4 years, working with young people on the streets of Phnom Penh. So I feel like I've seen different points on the continuum. I would say in the UK we have a stronger safety net. It was a lot easier to connect people back to housing because there was a lot more support to pay the rent for more people. On the other hand, in Cambodia you would literally see infants, 5, 6, 7-year-olds sleeping on the streets unaccompanied.
Wow.
So I feel like I've seen
The extremes.
a range here. And
and we're somewhere in between, aren't we?
Somewhere in between those two. But what I've been really encouraged by working here in Hennepin, and I think where we stack up well against other communities across the country actually, is the level of support we do get, as everybody does, a federal resource that helps us, but the state and the local government and the local community, including philanthropy and the faith community, have really put a lot of effort, a lot of energy, a lot of resource into this area, and I think it's encouraging. It helps me feel encouraged that we can really make progress on a lot of these issues together.
Yes. A few decades ago, I worked on creating for our denomination here in the Twin City area a participation in the housing. What's that name again of the Jimmy Carter started? Habitat.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, but I realized that's slow, and we had two other thrusts. Another was providing the money, the last chunk of money that was needed to bring about more affordable housing.
Right.
And also lobbying, a very important part of it.
Sure. And I would just love to say on that question of speed, you mentioned that being slow. Things do move slowly, but we need a sense of urgency here. We do need a sense of urgency when there are that many people experiencing homelessness, experiencing housing instability. What I loved about the 100-day challenge was that sense of urgency. It's let's set ourselves a goal. We don't know all the answers, but let's get out there and do something and plan and act as one and see how we can move this forward and how we can help people in new ways.
Well, who could the next 100-day challenge come from?
We're taking a breather on that, but I mean, it's a question that we ask ourselves. It's, for that particular methodology, is it something we want to replicate in another area? And I can certainly see arguments for doing it. But what I would love to see even more than that is just across the board, all of us to take on this sense of urgency and this sense that, yes, we need to plan, but we need to plan and act, and we need to move this stuff forward because this housing crisis is very real. A lot of people are suffering from it, and we need to act on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's delightful.